Welcome back to the poker vlog. This is episode number 224. For this one, we're playing high stakes at Bellagio. We're playing 10, 20, 40, and then after that, we're going over this online ClubWPT event that I played. So can't wait to share it with you. Hope you guys enjoy it. Let's go ahead and get started. It's just 3 days after the session in which I lost $2,000 that was highlighted in the previous episode. I'm on my way back to Bellagio to see if we can at least win some of that money back. I'm feeling good, so I put myself on the list for both 510 and 1020. I get called for 510 first, I buy in for 1500, that's the max. I take my seat at 3:15 in the afternoon, and my longtime poker hero Dan Harrington is at the must-move table with me. There aren't any interesting situations until 2 hours later when we're in the main game. We pick up ace-9 suited in the cutoff, the hijack raises to 30. He's a solid regular, I call. The big blind calls, we're going 3 ways to the flop in position, it comes 9-8-6 rainbow. We've got top pair and a backdoor flush draw. The opponent's check, I doubt the hijack has better than top pair, otherwise he would have bet. We probably have the best hand and need to protect our equity. We don't want to see any Broadway cards other than an ace, there are a number of other bad cards for us as well. I bet 50. I'm most concerned about the big blind having strong hands since this is a board that she could have connected well with. She'll have straights neither the hijack or I will have, and she can have all the set and suited 2-pair combos. Thankfully she folds, the hijack is more reluctant. He calls, the turn is the ace of hearts giving us top 2-pair, the hijack checks. My read is that he may have check called our flop bet with 2 overs, so I'm hoping he has a hand like ace-king that we can extract a lot of value from. I bet 130. There's a good amount of hesitation from the opponent. Eventually, he makes the call though. The river is the queen of spades. It's not my favorite. I would have preferred a 3 or a deuce. It's especially worrisome because jack 10 gets there to make the straight. The opponent checks. One thing that used to hurt my win rate a lot was being afraid to value bet rivers when I had strong but non-nutted hands. I used to check back too frequently in these scenarios. Here I bet 320 for value. I can maybe get called by ace-king, ace-jack, or a few other holdings if the hijack just doesn't believe that we're strong. He appears to genuinely be torn about whether to call or fold. About 45 seconds later, the hijack ultimately folds what he'd say is queen 10. He flopped 2 overs and a double gutter, then rivered second pair but thought that I could be bluffing. I let him know that he made the right laydown.
Had you the whole way.
This ends up being our last hand in 510. My name gets called for 1020. I'm happy to take a shot because the higher stakes game looks better than usual at the moment. There are 2 or 3 non-pros in the game, which doesn't happen very often. We rack up, booking a small win of slightly more than 200 in the 510. We exchange the $10 chips for $20 chips that they use in the high limit area. We also add on for 3,300 more to get our stack up to 5,000 before entering the much bigger game. We're in for 4,800 total on the day. Once I sit down, I'm told that the mandatory straddle's on, so it's actually 10, 20, 40 with a $20 big blind ante. This means the stakes are essentially twice as large as I thought when I agreed to take the seat. That's going to have to be okay. There's no turning back now. I buy into the big blind for 80 to cover the normal $20 blind, the $20 ante, and the $40 straddle. We've got 8 deuce offsuit the very first hand. The hijack, who appears to be a recreational player, limps in for 40. The small blind calls for 30 more. I check. We're going 3 ways to the flop, and it comes king 8 deuce with 2 diamonds. We flop bottom 2 pair in a hand that we would have gladly folded pre-flop if we were given a proper opportunity. The small blind checks. I check to the hijack. He fires for 80. The small blind isn't interested. He folds. I'm considering whether or not I'd like to check raise. I call so that I don't scare off the hijack. The turn is the jack of hearts. There are 2 flush draws on board. I check. Our opponent is worried that we have him beat. He checks back. The river is the 5 of hearts. It probably didn't change much. We can't let this check through again. I bet 200 for value. The hijack must at least have a small piece. Without thinking for too much time, he calls. We turn over our 2 pair. It's the winner. The opponent has a good attitude about it and starts laughing because it's not often that you see 8 deuce offsuit winning at showdown when there's been betting on 2 streets, particularly in high stakes games. It's nice to get off to a great start and get some confidence going. I'm not as comfortable playing with so few big blinds now that I know it's really a 10, 20, 40 game though. I add on for 5,000 more, so I'm in for 9,800 total as I exchange cash for 5 yellow $1,000 chips with the player on my right. With around 10k in front of us and at risk, it could be a very swingy day. Next we're dealt ace jack of hearts in the big blind. The cutoff raises to 120. We probably have the best hand. We don't want to flat and let the other players behind us in for cheap. I 3-bet to 400. The cutoff has an opportunity to play a big pot with us in position. He takes it and calls. We're heads up. The flop comes 7 deuce deuce rainbow. Playing 3-bet pots out of position, particularly when we don't improve, has always been uncomfortable, but we'll have all the big overpairs in our range that the opponent won't have, and we'll even have pocket 7 sometimes for a full house. I down bet to 280 just to see how the cutoff responds. It's still very possible that we're ahead. The cutoff calls. I imagine you do that with a variety of holdings, including hands as bad as 2 overs with a backdoor flush draw. The turn is the 3 of clubs. It's probably a blank. I'm not entirely certain what to do. I ultimately bet a large sizing of 1100 to put some low to medium pocket pairs in a tough spot. The opponent doesn't immediately let go of his cards. If he calls, we may bomb river as a bluff to represent a hand like aces, which we have removal for if we don't improve. Pocket pairs like 6s and 5s and 4s will have a difficult decision to make, and even something like 9s won't love seeing us bet large here, knowing that we may make a much larger bet on the next street. Eventually the cutoff folds. We're glad to get it through. The cutoff would later tell me that he had a worse ace high. Who knows if that's accurate? It seems very plausible though. Over a half hour later, we get 4 deuce suited in the straddle. The big blind is a high stakes reg who's similar to Greg Maddox in that he doesn't give many walks. The big blind raises to 160. We saw a few deuces come out on the board just recently, therefore we know it's within the realm of possibility to make a big hand holding a deuce, plus we're in position, which is the best. We call for 120 more. It's just the 2 of us. We can make it if we try. The flop comes 10-5 deuce with 2 clubs and a heart. We've got bottom pair and some backdoor draws. The big blind checks. We've got showdown value and have plenty of cards that can help us improve. We check back future trips. As the turn is another deuce, we have a sneaky 3 of a kind and an opponent who is very generous. He donates 120 to the charity for lanky white guys. While all donations are appreciated, I know that the big blind can afford to give more. I see if he'd like to give 360 to us. The opponent has a big heart, an even bigger wallet. Without much hesitation, he calls a 360. This is a great scenario for us. The river is the 7 of spades, the flush draw and all straight draws miss, the big blind checks. It's difficult to make trips, and after we check back the flop, the odds of us having a monster hand are drastically reduced, so our line looks like we either have 3 of a kind or nothing. We're going to bury bonds this one and swing for the fences with a $1,200 bet. A call here would be fantastic. It doesn't look like the opponent has much though. He folds. Perhaps he had some sort of draw that bricked. We win it, but really need to take down a bigger pot to keep a healthy profit since it's $90 a round between the straddle, blinds, and the $20 big blind ante that we're playing with. We pick up the perfect hand to win a large pot with. The deck has bestowed 2 kings upon us in the big blind to help us destroy our frenemies at the poker table. The cutoff limps in. He's the same player who we beat with 8 deuce offsuit in the first hand of our high stakes portion of the session. The player on our right in the small blind has no sympathy for people who limp around. He raises to 240. The small blind has been raising to isolate and punish the limper fairly often. It's not conduct that's appropriate when royalty is present. We put in the 3-bet to 700 to show him what's up. I expect the cutoff to fold quickly. He has other ideas. He limp calls a 3-bet for 660 more. I didn't see that coming at all. The cutoff only has about 3,600 more in his stack. The small blind isn't sure what's going on, but he doesn't like it. He folds. It's down to heads up and we're out of position. The flop comes queen 9-5 with 2 diamonds. We have an overpair to the board, but no diamond. It's still nice that there's no ace out there. I'd like to get all the money in as soon as possible. I bet 1,000. The cutoff doesn't appear to want to let go of his cards just yet. He may have somehow connected with this flop in a big way because he rips it in our face for 2,600 more. There's no chance that we're getting away from our hand for this price. We call, hoping that we're not completely crushed. The opponent asks if we want to run it once or twice.
It's up to you. I have kings. You can do whatever you want.
Without showing what he has, the opponent chooses for us to run it twice. It doesn't make a difference in the long run. It just reduces variance in the short run if you run it twice. This is a big game for me, so I'm happy to reduce the variance anyway. The opponent indicates that kings are ahead, at least at the moment. The first turn is the ace of hearts. I don't like seeing it. That card is followed by the 7 of spades, so I lose to hands like ace queen or ace high flush draws that turn to pair. The second turn is the deuce of diamonds. I again lose to ace high flush draws. The final card is another 9. This is about a $9,000 pot. Assuming the opponent got it all in against us with anything reasonable, I'd be happy if we could somehow win half of this. The issue is that the opponent shows that he jammed on us with pocket deuces, which is not reasonable at all, and we somehow only win half of this. We had the opponent in terrible shape, but he drills 1 of 2 outs on the second run out to split the pot with us.
Deuces, wow. One time.
This one hurts badly to chop. It's rare to get it in that good, and to not win the entire pot feels like a loss. Sometimes it's tough to mentally come back from these situations. Next we have ace queen of spades in the small blind. The opponent, who just got it in with a couple of ducks against us, raises to 100 from under the gun +1. This rings some alarm bells because usually the player just limps in. he must have something much stronger than normal. The button calls. I considered 3-betting, but with the rare raise from the under the gun +1 player, I call. We're going 3 ways to the flop and we're out of position. The dealer puts out ace-6-4 with 2 hearts. We've got a hidden top pair with a good kicker. I check. The opponents check as well. We probably have the best hand. The turn is another 6. This reduces the chance that we were up against a set or 2 pair on the flop. After a check through, the odds of being beat were slim anyway. I check once more though. The opponents also check. The river is the 10 of clubs. We can't let this check through again. I bet 300 to take someone to value town. The initial pre-flop raiser is a curious fellow. He calls. The small blind folds. We turn over top pair. It's good enough to take it down, but not quite good enough to make me feel all better from that set of deuces ridiculousness. We still need revenge from that hand. We pick up 6-5 of clubs in the hijack. I raise to 100. The opponent who chopped up our kings is in the big blind. He calls. We're heads up in position. The flop comes queen 7-3 rainbow. We've got a gutter, but no backdoor flush draw. The big blind checks. Our hand currently has no showdown value, although it could turn into the nuts down the road. I bet 120 to take a stab at it. The big blind can see it on my face that we've got nothing. He puts in the check raise to 340. It's 220 more for us. I'd be more inclined to call if we had the backdoor flush draw because any club on the turn would probably give us plenty of additional outs. I've also seen this opponent jam on us with a pair below the board, so just because he check raised us here doesn't necessarily mean that he's super strong. I call the raise with plans to drill a straight or steal the pot on a future street if an opportunity comes available. The turn is the ace of clubs, giving us at minimum fake top pair. It worries the big blind. He checks. I may have played a handful of ace-x suiteds the same way up to this point, as well as ace-queen and pocket aces. I represent those with a bet of 600. Revenge mode has been activated. Maybe we can get the big blind to even lay down a queen. Our plan works out this time. The opponent folds. We get the bluff through. We only need to steal an additional 3,000 from this particular player for us to feel like we're square. At least we're up about 1,700 on the day when we pick out pocket nines in the cutoff. A few more pros have entered the game to replace some of the recreational players, so it's not quite as good as it was at first. I raised to 100. One of those new pros 3-bets to 460, which isn't very nice of him. It's a large sizing. Still, we're both deep. If we can flop a set, maybe we can win a big one. I call for 360 more. We're heads up in position. The dealer puts out 10-9-3 with 2 spades. We've got middle set on a coordinated board. I'm trying to contain my excitement as the opponent reaches for chips. He down bets at 360. I'm debating whether or not we should make our move now. We don't want to see any spade or really any overcard to the board because they'll either complete possible straight draws, potentially give my opponent a higher set, or possibly scare my opponent from wanting to put more money in the pot if he has queens, for example, and an ace or king comes out. It's best to try and get as much money in now as possible. I raise to 1,000. The opponent doesn't appear to be considering a fold. It looks like he's either going to call or raise. I wouldn't be able to get my chips in fast enough if he does raise. If he has a set of 10s, it's just not our day. The big blind calls. He probably has some type of strong draw or an overpair. The turn is the 8 of diamonds. Queen jack, jack 7, and 7-6 make a straight. The big blind checks. Despite our hand being downgraded, we can't allow the opponent to see a free card. I'm sticking with our plan to target overpairs and big flush draws. I increased the bet sizing to 3,000. I don't exactly want to get jammed on, but we'll certainly be calling a shove if the opponent rips it. Instead, he calls. If he had us beat, he would have gotten it all in by now. The fact that he didn't makes me very confident that we've got the best hand. The only holding that I could see the opponent playing the same way up to this point that beats us is exactly queen jack of spades. Even then, I still think he probably would have shoved the turn. The river is the 6 of clubs, putting 4 to the straight on board. This has become a huge pot. We have $7,010 behind. The big blind checks. It's not likely that the opponent has a 7 in his hand, and we've already ruled out a set of 10s in most queen jack combinations. Even with 4 to the straight on board, by process of elimination, I'm confident that we've got the winner. If we want to bet, our best option is to shove. The opponent could still possibly call us with any overpair if he thinks that we're bluffing with a missed draw like king jack or a missed flush draw. Earlier on in my poker career, I'd occasionally play scared and check back a hand like this one on this board. Not anymore. I jammed for over $7,000. If we get called, this will be a $23,000 pot, which would be the biggest pot that I've ever played at Bellagio. We don't get snapped, so I'm feeling better and better about the situation. The big blind is perplexed. He isn't sure if I'm bluffing or not. The nuts have drastically changed since the flop came out, yet here I am, firing big on all 3 streets, saying that I'm not afraid to play for stacks. The big blind puts in a handful of yellow calling chips. We excitedly turn over our middle set. It's good. We get the absolute maximum to win the biggest pot that we've ever won at this property. There's no better feeling in poker than using all the information available to you to make the most money possible. After we get a count of the chips, the entire pot comes our way. The pro who we got is steaming and immediately picks up the scraps that he has remaining. We're up 13,000 on the session. If we left right now, it'd be my second biggest win ever, but we're not leaving. We pick up pocket 10s about 20 minutes later. We're on the button. I raise to 100. The small blind wants a piece. He 3-bets to 440. Apparently, he didn't see the shellacking that I put on the previous opponent who tried the same move on us earlier. I call for 340 more. Usually in these types of situations, I like to drill sets. That's what we do here. The flop comes 10-4-3 rainbow. We've got top set on a relatively dry board. Unfortunately, this time our opponent checks. We've got to start trying to get some money in here. I make a small bet of 360 to keep the small blind in with a variety of non-pair hands. The opponent isn't impressed. He puts in the check raise to 1140. Wow. Does he somehow also have a monster? We both started this hand extremely deep. I'm still amped up on winning the previous hand. Usually I'd flat to let the small blind keep bluffing, but in this case I'm concerned that even that will look suspicious. There's a good chance that the opponent will just shut down if a check raise of his gets called. I re-raise to 3,500. I'm hoping that the opponent either has a set or an overpair that he can continue with, or maybe he just won't believe that I'd put a third bet in on the flop with the nuts and will do something wild. After all, it's extremely unlikely that I'd make 2 sets and 3-bet pots just 20 minutes apart. The small blind doesn't have anything. He folds after only a few seconds. I got over anxious with that one and pulled the trigger too soon. I played one of the best hands that I played all year, followed by one of the worst ones with that re-raise. Part of my concern was that if the opponent had some kind of straight draw and he hit it, I'd double him up for 17,000. I didn't want to give him a chance to see the turn without paying extra for it, since he would have had massive implied odds. Also, any ace, deuce, 5, 6, or 7 complete straight draws. The only turns that allow us to keep the nuts are 9s and 8s. In this case, since it appears that the opponent had very little, I let him off the hook easy and could have potentially made a lot more if he was willing to triple barrel bluff. Either way, we're up 14,500 and are feeling good about how the session's going. The plan is to play until I lose a significant pot. 5.5 hours in, we pick up pocket 9s in the straddle. The opponent who check raised us in the 10s hand raises to 120. The hijack calls, the cutoff calls. I don't want to reopen the action. I call for 80 more. We're going 4 ways to the flop. It's 7 deuce deuce rainbow. It's about as good as it gets without us improving to a set. We all check. The turn is another deuce. We've got a full house. We need to bet to protect our equity. I make it 360 to go. The initial pre-flop raiser calls. I wonder if he somehow has a higher pocket pair. It's a bit too ambitious for the middle position player to call with 2 overs when there's still multiple players behind him. The hijack comes out of nowhere with a raise to 1,400. This doesn't make much sense at all. Did he check on the flop with 7s full? It seems more likely that he's just trying to see where he's at with a single 7 or a worse pocket pair than ours. The cutoff folds. I call hoping that the player in between us folds. He doesn't. He puts in a back 3-bet to 3,200. What on earth is going on in this hand? The middle position player will rarely have a deuce. He could have a hand like pocket aces or pocket 7s, but I'm not completely buying it. The hijack folds. I now consider turning my hand into a bluff because I'll have more suited deuces in my range than anyone else, and I'll also have pocket 7s. If I put in a back 4-bet bluff to try and get an even higher overpair or even pocket 7s to fold, it would be one of the most elaborate and sickest moves that I've ever made if it got through. I don't have the heart to try it because it could also decimate the stack if it doesn't work out. I fold, not knowing exactly what we're up against. I'm suspicious.
What kind of bluff did we have there? No bluff?
Later on, the opponent named Dylan lets us know for the vlog that he indeed made the back 3-bet with pocket aces. The hijack says that he raised the turn and then folded pocket 6s. This qualifies as losing a significant pot. It's time to rack up a massive win. Played for almost 6 hours today. I got to play with Dan Harrington to start out in the 5-10, and not really any interesting hands there too much, but it's really cool to play with him. And then I got called for 10-20, got there, and it was 10-20-40, and I didn't get the best second run out with that king's hand, but I've sucked out on some people recently, so I was kind of due for something like that to happen. And then I just played probably one of my favorite hands that I've ever played with that 9s. It's tough to go for a river shove there, and then also get called by worse, but I went with my gut, and it ended up making me an extra $7,000, so that was awesome. And then played that set of tens hand. Obviously could have just called the check raise, but I was kind of getting greedy there. And anyway, I think I was up like 14,000 or so at the high point, and ended up winning 11,800 for I guess my third biggest win that I've ever had. So I lost 2K last session, and sometimes it's tough to recover from that, but you know, everything just went really, really well today, and I'm super excited.
Little do I know at the time, but this would just be the start of the biggest heater of my life. The very next day, I host a bounty event on ClubWPT.com in which the winner receives a $12,000 passport to the WPT World Championship event that takes place in December at Wynn Las Vegas. The person who knocks me out receives a WPT Prime passport worth $2,500 as the bounty prize. Whoever gets second only receives $150, so there's a large drop off between first and second. People need to either get first or knock me out, basically. There are 2,154 players in the field. It's enormous. I believe that I've got no realistic shot at winning, but I'm not too concerned because I get a seat to the World Championship tournament anyway as part of my sponsorship with WPT. My only goal for this is to play my best, show the viewers my strategy for tournaments, and have an interesting stream. We certainly accomplished that. I battled my absolute hardest for 6 hours, wagering it all as complete bluffs, suffering through bad beats, and being short-stacked multiple times, but I never gave up. Several days before the event, I briefly discussed with WPT what we'd do if I happened to win the event. We thought it was such an unlikely outcome that we laughed and said that we'd give away 2 seats for the World Championship, though it wasn't formally approved. As I reached the final table, giving away multiple seats to the $15 million guarantee event became my main incentive to win. I want as many viewers as possible to have the chance at life-changing money. In back-to-back hands at the final table, I get completely torched. I get it in with ace-queen suited versus ace-9 suited, flop top-top to start out in great shape, but the opponent has the flush draw. The turn is a brick, and the river is the jack of hearts completing the flush to give ace-9 the nuts in a devastating hand for us. Luckily, I started the hand as the chip leader, and I'm still in okay shape, especially with pocket aces immediately following, but we get into another big pot with one player all in. I somehow lose to both players despite having them crushed initially. The all-in player makes a straight and gets a triple up with ace-7 offsuit. The other player flopped a set of threes. I go from being chip leader to being the shortest stack at the table with only 4.5 big blinds in the span of 2 hands. After coming back from a break, I get aces again, and I almost don't want them with the previous brutal beat still fresh in my mind. They don't disappoint us this time though. They hold, and a lot of life is pumped back into the stack. Still, we've got some work to do. Moments later, we pick out pocket 4s, 5-handed with about 10 big blinds, and have no other choice but to get it all in. 2 players call to get the bounty and send me packing. Much to their dismay, we flop a set to hopefully stay alive. Without having the nuts, there's still a bit of worry that we could be beat. That's until we get to showdown and see that we had the best hand the entire way for a full triple up and to be chip leader again. I didn't get too many premium hands the whole tournament, but they're coming when I need them the most. We get aces for the 3rd time at the final table. The first time I got them, my stack got wrecked. The second time we won a big pot. This 3rd time, we get it all in and cooler queens to win a 3-way all in. Now I can really be aggressive to put the pressure on the remaining opponents. All I care about is getting first place. I'm happy to be taking 60-40 situations, especially while we have the other players covered by a lot. Not every attempt of mine to bully the opponents works out, but I get multiple chances to get lucky against them, and if they don't run completely pure, they're dead. We get it in here with queen 10 suited versus ace 4 suited. We get an unnecessarily good flop with top 2 pair. The turn gives the opponent the flush draw. I've seen too many backdoor draws get hit on me today to celebrate early. The river seals the hand for us though. We're down to heads up with a commanding chip lead. I'll be getting it in with all kinds of hands against a short stack while we have them dominated. King Jack is way better than the minimum requirement when we still have a huge chip lead even if we lose. Unfortunately, we get it in versus Ace Jack and are a decent underdog, but losing this hand isn't the end of the world. We flop top 2 pair once again though. I'm in shock, but don't want to get too excited before the final card comes out. The turn gets us one step closer to the win. The river card ends the tournament. We beat 2,153 other players, which is by far the largest field event that I've ever won. There really wasn't much incentive for me to win other than to give an extra 12K passport out, prove to myself that I could win a big tournament, and show people that I'm more than just a cash game player. I give second place one of the 12K passports for making it all the way to the end, and I give the third place finisher the 2,500 passport, which was the bounty prize. I still need to figure out a fun way to give the additional 12K passport to someone in the next few months. As amazing as this accomplishment was, it's not even close to the end of the heater. In fact, it's just the beginning. I take a trip out to Tampa, where in my very next tournament, just 2 days after winning the bounty event online, I make it to Heads Up in an $1,100 event with 116 players, including some of the world's best. My very next tournament after that, I make it to day 3 as one of the chip leaders in the WPT $3,500 main event. I have a top 10 stack with only 99 players remaining out of 1,165 entrants with over $600,000 for first place. I don't want to spoil how I did, so I'll just say that I have 2 of my biggest live tournament scores in back-to-back events only a few days apart. Then I head to Austin a few days later for another 5-figure cash game win on stream. In a week and a half, I win more money than I won in any previous year that I've had of being a professional poker player. I'll have videos covering these tournament runs and cash game win in the upcoming weeks, so be sure to be on the lookout for those.
That's it for this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, I'd appreciate it if you hit the like and subscribe buttons because it helps out the channel a ton. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to let me know in the comment section. I'm happy to get back to you. This was just an insane run that I've been on. This covers, the first kind of part of it where, I win big in a cash game at Bellagio, then the next day win the online ClubWPT event, and obviously had to run extremely well to win that one out of 2,154 players. I got bad beat a couple times, put some bad beats on people, and there wasn't really anything in it for me to win that one since I have a seat anyway, but glad for a couple of the other guys to win passports. And it was just, it was pretty sweet to like stream for 6 hours to show every hand that I played, and that's all on YouTube. So if you want to check that out, I'll have a link down below in the description box to those streams. The stream got cut off for like a minute, but then I got it back up. And then to crush in like some live tournaments right after that, and then win another stream. I'm just on the biggest heater that I've ever been on. This year has already been nuts in terms of how well I've been running, but there was like this 2-week span where everything was just going as good as possible, particularly in tournaments, online and live, and I guess in cash too. But I basically won like 70K in a week and a half, which is nuts. Anyway, I'll have more information about, I guess I'll cover some of that stuff in future vlogs, so I'm excited to share that with you. Be on the lookout for that stuff. Meetup game in Australia at the Star Gold Coast. Very excited for that. That'll be probably, that's the 21st. So I hope to see a lot of the Australian fans out there. And then Bellagio 5 Diamond is coming up in October. So that'll be a nice home court WPT series for us. And I'm excited to play in those events. Anyway, hope you're all doing well. Stay safe. Good luck at the tables, and I'll see you next time.